Hello everyone, I hope you all had a great Christmas and all the best for the new year. Basically today I thought I would just review the Doctor Who Christmas special from this year, The Return of Doctor Mysterio. As you all know, I've been doing Defending Series 9 over the past few months in preparation to kind of fine-tune my reviewing skills, because I want to be able to review episodes as they're broadcast in Series 10 and future episodes, Christmas specials, that kind of thing. And I have done that of Class recently, but this is actually the first Doctor episode that I've reviewed this close to broadcast. So I'm quite excited to be doing this, and obviously, because the episode is so fresh in my mind, and also this is my first impression of it, I've not watched it too many times, I've only watched it twice, it should be a slightly different approach to usual. So without further ado, here's what I thought of the return of Doctor Mysterio. So first of all, I thought I'd look at the characters and cast of this story. Peter Capaldi as the 12th Doctor was completely on form, as usual. I particularly liked his dynamic with the young Grant at the start of the story. It was much better than the Doctor-Child dynamics we've seen in episodes such as In the Forest of the Night. He also got lots of nice things to do in this episode, providing his usual sarcasm and wit and humour, but also pulling off some quite sombre scenes where he recalls his time with Riversong, and, you know, he's quite melancholy and philosophical when he's talking about how all things end but all things begin as well. So it was nice to see him again after a year away, and yeah, as usual, he was absolutely fantastic. Now on to Nardole. Now, Nardole was a character that some viewers were sceptical about. I was actually looking forward to seeing him come back, because I enjoyed him very much in The Husbands of Riversong. Yes, he was only a minor character then, and I was a little bit unsure about how he'd be used, but I was fairly confident that he would be developed and used well in the episode and have a great function, and in Series 10 as well, and that is exactly what happened. He was absolutely great. I mean, I just love how he popped up here and there, coming to and from the restroom, for example, and there's some great wordplay there in his first scene. It was also nice to see Nardole and the Doctor working together, communicating with him like a spy, or coming to the rescue by materialising the TARDIS around him. His dynamic with the Doctor is quite unique, I think. I mean, as a character, he provides a unique insight and has these kind of sneaky, clever observations, like the thing about New York not being a capital city, that then become much more important later on. Much like the traditional Shakespearean fool, he's quite foolish on the outside, but on the inside he's quite wise and clever, and observes these little facts and keeps them in the back of his head ticking over, and they become relevant later on. And that was really refreshing, actually, to see a character like that in Doctor Who, because we've not really seen a character like Nardole before. He is very different to what we've seen in previous companions and guest characters and guest stars. But as well as the comedy which Matt Lucas is so famous for, he actually had some really nice emotional material as well. For example, his final scene was absolutely sublime, which was added to by the reuse of that fantastic library theme. Thank you so much, Murray Gold, that absolutely made the score of the episode for me, which, by the way, was brilliant, as always. But back to Nardole. It just goes to show that Matt Lucas is perfectly capable at pulling off moving emotional material, and just as capable at doing that as he is at doing the comedy. But yes, of course his main appeal is comedy, like I say, and I will note that his delivery and performance make all of his lines as Nardole stand out hilarious. For example, at the scene in Lucy's flats, where he's just there in the background, playing with the baby toys in the baby bottle. Oh, it's nice and warm and tasty. I mean, Matt Lucas just picks that material up off the page, picks the lines up, and turns it into something really funny. Like I say, it's his delivery, it's his performance, which make him a really funny character. And again, it's not something we've seen much of in Doctor Who before. Like I say, this kind of idea of a Shakespearean fool character. We've not had any reason to have that kind of character before in Doctor Who. And so it's really refreshing to have Nardole here, actually. And I look forward to seeing what else he brings to the show in Series 10 and in future episodes. So overall, Nardole is a very welcome addition to the TARDIS team, in my opinion. As for the rest of the cast, when I heard it was going to be an American story set in New York, I was a little bit sceptical, because American actors aren't always great. But actually, since making my notes, I've realised that the only 3 American actors in this, well, the main ones, are the 3 people that play Grant, when he's a kid, a teenager, and then when he's an adult as well. But Charity Wakefield, for example, who I actually thought was American to start with, she was completely convincing as Lucy. You know, she really sounded naturally American. And of course, Andy Pryor did an excellent job with the casting, as usual. Like I say, America is a big place with lots of rubbish actors and rubbish films, but Justin Chatwin luckily was a good choice for the Ghost, I think, and he gave a very varied and interesting performance. It was also really interesting and refreshing to have a German actor in the role of Dr. Sim. Alexander Jovanovic, I think that's how you say it, was extremely malevolent, making Dr. Sim a very traditional comic book style villain. There was also Mr. Brock from Harmony Shoal, who wasn't quite as memorable, but was still a nice addition to the episode's cast. I will say that the plot and structure of the story worked very well in my opinion, in that they were relatively simple and accessible compared to previous episodes and specials, and it was nice to start with Grant as a child, you know, with it being Christmas, the magic and wonder of Christmas, through a child's eyes, especially with him thinking the Doctor was Santa to start with. That was quite amusing as well for the audience. And it was nice to kind of keep flicking back between Grant as an adult and Grant as a kid and teenager. I mean, it was timey-wimey in a way, it was time travel, but it wasn't in your face. And I'm not saying that hasn't worked in the past, because as you know, I'm a massive fan of Series 8 and 9, and Stephen Moffat in general, but I think at this point in time is what we needed, something less timey-wimey, something less complex, something much more simple and accessible for the general viewer. You know, the show's been away for a year, let's just have something fresh and different. As some have pointed out, I suppose there were two strands to the main plot. Firstly, we had Grant and Lucy, and I suppose Grant working out his true identity and declaring his love for Lucy, and the Shoal of the Winter Harmony's invasion of Earth. I think both of these worked really well with each other and balanced each other nicely, with the alien invasion taking a sort of backseat and providing a nice backdrop to the relationship between Grant and Lucy. Setting the story in America, I think, as well, really helped make the show feel fresh again, as I've already mentioned, and many others have as well. Indeed, it's very different to what we saw in Series 8 and 9. The Harmony Shoal aliens themselves were really threatening, I thought, and while it was nice to see them back from the Husbands of River song, this was a link that the casual viewer could actually gloss over, and they worked terrifically in the context of a comic book style story. By that I mean, they're very gruesome without being too graphic, and the idea of brain swapping is pretty cliched, making them more accessible to the viewer. You know, it's like having Frankenstein or Ghost or something, I suppose. They just seem to fit the whole superhero style really well. To be honest, the concept of aliens posing as humans via zips in their foreheads, planning to take over the Earth's key authority figures, is basically identical to that of the Slitheen. However, I always thought the overall appearance of the Slitheen and their plan to use a pig as a distraction in their invasion was far too comical. Here, while the Shoal of the Winter Harmony do fit the light-hearted tone, they're taken seriously, as is their plan, and the joins in their foreheads are more subtle than the zips with the Slitheen. You know, it's much less of a gimmick, and the body horror aspect of them works well as well, because of how disgusting the insides of their heads are. I'd definitely be interested to know at what point Moffat decided that they'd be returning as the enemy for this episode, and if he has plans to use them again in Series 10, given the shot we saw of a converted unit soldier with one of the brain things inside them and the scar across their face. It would definitely make for a cool story to have them maybe in London in England with Osgood and Kate and Unit and just have a massive invasion. That would be really, really interesting, yeah. I'd be up for that. The final section of my notes I've got here is the direction and effects. I thought the directing in this story was fantastic. There was exceptional use of imaginative camera angles and effects, such as the opening graphic novel shot, the split screens used for the phone conversation, and the Doctor appearing live through the screen in Harmony Shoal. I loved how, for the most part, they used very old school effects where possible. It gave the episode a very traditional Doctor Who feel, but also harked back to those old Christopher Reeve Superman movies and things that people have been talking about. They're not things that I've personally seen myself, but I kind of understand where they're coming from when they say it's not gimmicky, CGI, flashy superhero stuff like the stuff you get in the cinemas these days. It's much more old-fashioned, traditional ways of doing it, which ironically I think made it feel more cinematic. Another great example of making use of resources and doing things simply but effectively is the reuse of the Coal Hill corridor from Class. Even though it's noticeable to those of us that are in that young adult target audience bracket, to those that have not watched that show because they're too young or too old, it looks just like a new set. The Bulgaria studios they used looked surprisingly realistic as New York, a location that I don't believe could have been pulled off as effectively in Cardiff city centre. I mean, I know Doctor Who has done New York before, but never kind of modern day New York, never superhero New York, which is slightly more fairy tale, slightly more different, and full of potential and magic, if you like. You know, it's the one from comic books, and therefore I think that kind of very cliched, stereotypical look of that set works really well for the story, and definitely benefited it. In fact, I think actually using less Cardiff locations overall than usual definitely helps to add to the fresh feeling of the episode, because visually it looked very different as well, because it wasn't set in modern day London or Victorian London or just another old spaceship or corridor. It was superhero New York, a genre that the show hasn't really explored yet, with good reason, but actually here it works surprisingly well. And just, yeah, the overall visual effect of those sets, I think, having less Cardiff there, really helped to make it feel fresh and new and exciting. So overall, what did I think of the return of Doctor Mysterio? Well, like I say, it was a very fresh episode. It felt very new, very different, and I think Doctor Who definitely benefited from having a year away, and this kind of served as a sort of starting point for new viewers and new audiences. I mean, obviously, Series 10 with Bill, that will be the main starting point for new viewers, but this was also very accessible for people that haven't watched Doctor Who before or in a long time. You know, particularly the Doctor's lines about everything ending, but everything beginning again as well, and just the overall tone of the episode. Themes of identity and renewal and new adventures. It just felt so unique and unlike anything we've seen in Doctor Who before. And to be honest, I'm glad that Stephen Moffat did that. Like I say, I think it's what the show needed at this point in time. And it was actually really nice on Twitter and social media afterwards to see so many people being enthusiastic about Doctor Who for once. Because usually, you know, you just get the usual things. Oh, it was too timey-wimey, too complex. Damn you, Stephen Moffat. But here, it was generally a positive reaction, I think, from lots of people, particularly those you wouldn't expect to be positive about Doctor Who in its current state. And the Series 10 trailer at the end as well was hugely exciting. It had the same feeling of new adventures, new starting on points, very fresh, very exciting, and I can't wait to see where the show goes next. I think with the addition of Nardole and the addition of Bill next year, the show will feel very different. It's going to shake it up a bit, and hopefully it's going to be that catalyst that we all know the show needs, just to bring in some new audiences, some new viewers, and kind of reaffirm its place as a quality TV show in its own right, let alone being, you know, cult sci-fi, in the minds of the general British public. So I think I'd probably give the return of Doctor Mysterio a 9 out of 10. And if you enjoyed the episode as much as me, and you have access to a digital device, computer, iPhone, whatever, which to be honest, most people do these days, I would highly recommend you check out the new spin-off series from Titan Comics, The 12th Doctor, Ghost Stories. Unfortunately, for those of you like me that like physical comic books, and, you know, being able to turn the page yourself, it's currently only available as a digital comic series, but I would say it's worth getting because it's only 69p per issue. The first one came out straight after the episode on Boxing Day, and while it's nothing special in its own right, it's just nice to see Grant and Lucy and Jennifer again. It's set 8 years after the events of this episode, and they're really nice with the Doctor to have an adventure in the TARDIS and battle new alien forces. Thank you very much for watching this review. I hope you enjoyed it. Please let me know what you thought of this episode in the comments below, and I'll see you next year to review all the episodes of Doctor Who Series 10, something I'm very much looking forward to doing. But of course I'll be back before that with some other content on the channel. If you haven't already checked out my Wholock teaser for my Christmas FA coming out on New Year's Eve, please go and watch that now. It's got the 12th Doctor and Sherlock, and hopefully should be very exciting if I can pull it off in time. So please subscribe if you haven't already for that, and other new content in the new year, which I'll be planning and talking about in a future video, and I'll see you on the 31st for Wholock. So again, thank you so much for watching, and bye for now.